AI performance is often measured by a single number from a benchmark test. The assumption is that a higher score means a smarter model, but this simple idea leads to deeply flawed conclusions about what these systems can actually do.
And you can see why this belief is so popular. It's simple, it's easy to track, and it feels like it's giving us a clear, straightforward measure of a model's abilities.
And when you look at the charts, that progress looks, well, undeniable. You see these massive jumps in scores from models like GPT-4 and others on really tough benchmarks. This fuels claims that they've hit or maybe even blown past human-level performance on all sorts of cognitive tasks.
But that whole narrative, all of it, hinges on one single critical assumption, that these tests are actually a reliable way to measure general intelligence. So what happens if the tests themselves are the problem?
Well, the first major issue is something called data contamination. And the best way to think about it is this. It's like getting the answer key to a test before you even walk into the exam room.
See, data leakage happens when the questions and answers from these public benchmarks end up inside the enormous data sets that are used to train the models in the first place. So the model isn't really learning how to reason through a problem. A lot of the time, it's just memorizing the answers it's already been shown.
This whole situation leads us straight to a classic idea from economics called Goodhart's law. It starts with a really simple observation about how we use metrics.
That when a measure becomes a target, it stops being a good measure. And that's exactly what happened here. As soon as getting a high benchmark score became the main goal for AI labs, the thing that gets you media attention and investment, the benchmarks themselves were no longer an impartial test. Instead, models are now built and tweaked specifically to ace these tests, which isn't the same as learning general, useful skills for the real world.
And the impact of this is, well, it's huge. Take this example. On a physics benchmark, GPT-4 got a score of 65% on questions that were already public, questions it had probably seen during training. But when it was given brand new questions it had never encountered before, its accuracy just plummeted to 26%. That is a massive 39-point drop, and it really shows the huge difference between just memorizing an answer and actually understanding the concept behind it.
But here's the thing. Even if you could solve data leakage completely, there's a much deeper problem. Getting a perfect score in a neat, controlled lab environment doesn't mean a model will succeed out in the messy, unpredictable real world.
Think about it. Synthetic benchmarks are clean. They're predictable. The questions are perfectly phrased, and the answers are clear-cut. The real world, on the other hand, is anything but. It's messy. Data is ambiguous, it's incomplete, and it's always changing. A model trained only for the clean world is almost always unprepared for the messy one.
This mismatch has a name. It's called a distributional shift. It's one of the fundamental challenges in all of machine learning. All it means is that the patterns in the data a model sees out in the real world are different from the patterns it learned from in training. Put simply, the world changes, and the model's knowledge becomes outdated.
So, let's break that down with a simple manufacturing example. First, you could have a covariate shift. That's when your inputs change. Say a factory machine suddenly starts running for more hours each day. Then there's label shift, which is when the outcomes change. Maybe that same machine starts breaking down more often. And finally, there's concept shift, where the actual rules of the game change. Maybe a new maintenance plan is introduced, so the things that used to predict a breakdown don't work anymore. Any one of these shifts can take a model that was once incredibly accurate and make it totally useless.
So what's the consequence of all this? It means that these models, which look so intelligent on paper, are actually incredibly fragile in practice. They can break in ways that are really surprising and often not very human-like at all.
And this is not just some theoretical idea. People who actually use these models for their jobs are reporting a huge gap between the high benchmark scores and how useful the models are in the real world. One industry expert put it bluntly, saying that some of the major benchmarks are just awful, filled with totally irrelevant stuff that has nothing to do with what customers actually need.
Just how fragile are they? It can be pretty shocking. One analysis showed that GPT-4 could solve a certain type of logic problem with over 95% accuracy. But then, researchers added a single, totally irrelevant sentence to the prompt. Just one sentence. And the model's performance completely collapsed, down to about 40%. So why does this happen? It's because the model hasn't actually learned the deep logical structure of the problem. Instead, it's learned to take statistical shortcuts. It's found superficial patterns in its training data that usually lead to the right answer. But as soon as a prompt changes just a little bit, those shortcuts don't work anymore, and what looked like reasoning completely falls apart. So when you add it all up, the data contamination, the fact that they don't really reflect the real world, and how fragile the models are, it's totally fair to ask, are these benchmarks worth anything at all?
The answer is yes, they are valuable, but not for the reason most people think. They are not a measurement of intelligence. They are, however, an absolutely essential tool for research and development.
Here's what they're good for. Benchmarks give everyone a common language. They let researchers compare one model against another. They help them reproduce results and build on each other's work. They take what would be a bunch of scattered experiments and turn it into collective progress. They are a tool for scientific accountability, not a final judgment on a model's intelligence.
So in the end, it's crucial to remember what a benchmark score actually is. It's a measure of one thing and one thing only, a model's performance on a very specific, very standardized test. It is not a measure of intelligence out in the world. And understanding that one distinction, well, it changes everything about how we see AI progress.